The radio crackled to life, cutting through the silence of the squad car. Unit 41, possible break-in at 1142 Carson Avenue. Back entrance open, no sign of forced entry. Neighbors reported movement inside. Responding officer, please confirm. I exhaled, rubbing the fatigue from my eyes. It was nearly 3 a.m., the dead zone of the night shift, when exhaustion made the mind play tricks on you. I grabbed the radio. Copy that, dispatch. Officer Reynolds, en route, ETA, 5 minutes. I had been with the department for 8 years. Not the longest tenure, but enough to have seen my fair share of human misery, domestic disturbances, drug busts, suicides. The real horrors of the job weren't the adrenaline-fueled chases or the shootouts Hollywood loved to glorify. It was the small, quiet moments of despair, the things you couldn't unsee. Carson Avenue was one of those streets where time seemed to have given up. Dilapidated houses with boarded-up windows, unkempt lawns that had long surrendered to weeds. It wasn't surprising that a place like this would attract squatters or desperate thieves. I pulled up to the house. It was dark, save for the faint glow of a streetlight filtering through broken blinds. No sign of movement. I stepped out, my boots crunching against gravel, hand resting on the grip of my service weapon. Dispatch, I'm on scene, doing a perimeter check. Static. Then, copy that, Unit 41. Stay safe. I moved cautiously toward the back entrance. The door was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the wind. I pushed it open wider, my flashlight slicing through the darkness. The air inside was stale, tinged with mildew and something faintly metallic. Police, I called out, stepping inside. If anyone's in here, make yourself known. Silence. I advanced into what must have once been a kitchen. Cabinets hung open, their contents scattered across the floor. A single chair stood in the center of the room, tilted slightly, as if someone had left in a hurry. Something about the scene made my skin crawl. I moved further in, sweeping my light across the walls. Graffiti, crude symbols scrawled in black marker. At first glance, it was the usual nonsense gang tags, random profanities. But then I noticed something else, hidden among the chaos of lines and shapes. Words written over and over in shaky handwriting. Do not turn around. A chill crept up my spine. I swallowed, willing my pulse to steady. I'd seen plenty of junkies scrawl paranoid messages before, warnings of imaginary threats. It meant nothing. A creak sounded from upstairs. I pivoted, gun drawn. Police, show yourself. Nothing. Just the wind shifting the old bones of the house. I exhaled, shaking my head. Get a grip, Reynolds. I moved toward the staircase, my boots heavy on the warped wooden floor. The steps groaned under my weight, the flashlight beam bouncing off peeling wallpaper. The upstairs hallway was lined with doors, most ajar, revealing darkened rooms filled with forgotten relics of past lives, discarded mattresses, broken furniture, old toys. Another sound, a whisper. I froze, listening. Reynolds. My name, spoken just above a breath. I swung my light wildly, scanning every inch of the hallway. Who's there? My voice came out sharper than intended. Silence. I took a step forward, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. One of the doors at the end of the hall was closed. A single word was etched into the wood. Inside. I swallowed, my throat dry. Logic told me it was just some derelict playing games. A vagrant who thought scaring a cop would be funny. But my gut told me something else, something I didn't want to acknowledge. I reached for the doorknob and pushed. The room was empty, just 4 walls and a bare wooden floor. But in the center, something lay on the ground, a small, battered cassette recorder. I stepped inside, my fingers hovering over my radio. Dispatch, static. Static. Loud, crackling, consuming. Then a voice, warped, distant, whispering through the white noise. Don't turn around. Every hair on my body stood on end. The air behind me shifted. A breath, so close it kissed the back of my neck. My body locked in place, every instinct screaming at me to move, to run. But I couldn't, because deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. Then the lights went out. I forced myself to move, jerking my gun up as I turned. But the darkness swallowed everything. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic, jumping shadows against the walls. My breath came fast, ragged. Then I heard it. A wet, shuffling sound. Not footsteps, something dragging. Something moving toward me. The recorder screeched to life again, its distorted voice now frenzied. Don't look, don't look, don't look. I staggered backward, my heel hitting the door frame. I needed to get out, now. A whisper slithered through the room, impossibly close. You see me now. The flashlight failed completely. In the pitch black, something cold, clammy, touched my hand. I fired. The muzzle flash illuminated the room for half a second, and in that half second, I saw it. A face inches from mine. Hollow eyes locked onto me. No lips, just an open, stretching maw. Its skin rippled, shifting like smoke, trying to form something solid. Then darkness swallowed it again. I bolted, crashing through the door and down the stairs, the house groaning around me like it was alive. My pulse roared in my ears. I hit the front door at full force, stumbling into the streetlight's glow. Silence. I turned back. The house loomed, empty and still. My flashlight flickered back on in my shaking hands. My radio crackled. Unit 41 status? I swallowed hard. Clear, no suspect found. A pause. Then, copy that. Return to station. I climbed into my cruiser, my hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. My heartbeat refused to slow. I glanced back at the house one last time. The upstairs window, a dark shape stood there. Watching, I floored it, leaving Carson Avenue behind. But I knew the truth. I hadn't left alone. 911. What's your emergency? The woman's voice on the other end was barely a whisper. Someone's in my house. I sat up straight in my patrol car, adrenaline snapping me awake. What's your address, ma'am? A pause. Then, in a trembling voice, I don't know. Ma'am, what do you mean you don't know? Is this your home? Another pause. A shaky breath. No, I just woke up here. Dispatch pinged her location. An abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The kind that had been empty so long it stopped existing to people. I flipped on my lights and sped down the empty street. I've been a cop for 7 years. I've had my fair share of bizarre calls, drugged-out ramblings, prank calls, the occasional actual emergency. But something about this one set me on edge. The way she spoke, the way her voice barely seemed there. When I arrived, the house looked dead. 2 stories of rotting wood and broken windows. A place where dust had settled so deeply that time forgot it. My radio crackled. Unit 12, do you copy? It was dispatch. Caller has disconnected. No further response. I exhaled. Standard procedures said I should wait for backup, but something in my gut told me I shouldn't. I approached the porch, the wood groaning under my boots. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the night breeze. I drew my flashlight, sweeping the dim foyer. The air inside was thick with mildew and something faintly metallic. Blood? Police, I called out. If anyone's here, make yourself known. Silence. I stepped in, scanning the dust-covered floor. No footprints, no signs of struggle. But then I saw an old rotary phone on the floor, the receiver dangling. The same phone she must have called from. The cord had been ripped from the wall. A soft creak came from upstairs. I tightened my grip on my flashlight and unholstered my weapon. This is the police. If you're up there, I need you to come down. Nothing. I climbed the stairs, my heart beat loud in my ears. The upstairs hallway was lined with doors, all open except one at the very end, closed tight. I moved toward it, each step heavy. My fingers brushed the doorknob, and I paused, listening. Then, from inside the room, a whisper, "Help me." I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No furniture, no woman. Just a single mirror standing against the far wall, cracked and cloudy, but something about it made my skin crawl. I swept my light around. "Ma'am, where are you?" Then I saw it. My reflection wasn't moving. I took a step back, my breathing sharp. The me in the mirror stood still, eyes locked on mine, mouth slightly open. I raised my hand. The reflection did not. And then slowly, its mouth moved. "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The reflection smiled a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far. Then the light flickered, and the room went black. A sharp whisper rasped at my ear. "Run." I didn't hesitate. I bolted out of the room, down the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. I hit the porch, gasping for air, spinning around to look at the house. It was dark. No broken windows, no open door. just an empty, abandoned house, the way it had looked for decades. I scrambled for my radio. Dispatch, I need immediate backup at. I looked at my GPS. My location wasn't there. Only static came through my radio. I turned back to the house. The front door was closed now, and in the upstairs window, barely visible behind a grimy pane of glass, was a woman. She was smiling. My own voice whispered in my ear, "You shouldn't be here." The world spun, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I got in my patrol car and drove. I don't remember getting back to the station. I don't remember the drive at all. When I checked my call log, there was no record of the 911 call, no backup call, no dispatch logs. But later that night, while reviewing old case files, I found something, a missing persons report from 1973. A woman, last seen entering that same abandoned house. And the photo? The woman in the upstairs window, smiling. I remember the call like it just happened. The kind of call that burrows deep into your brain, whispering to you when the world goes quiet. I'd been with the department for 7 years. Night shifts were my routine. My life, small-town policing, wasn't glamorous, but it kept the bills paid. Most nights were slow, dewy stops, domestic disturbances, the occasional break-in. Nothing I couldn't handle. Then came the call. It was just after 2 a.m. Dispatch crackled in my patrol car. Unit 14, possible trespassing at 46 Morrow Lane. Caller refused to identify themselves, stated someone was in their house, then disconnected. Morrow Lane was a dead-end street near the edge of town. Only a few houses, most abandoned or condemned. Still, protocol was protocol. I radioed back, copy, dispatch, en route. The drive was uneventful. The roads were empty, save for the fog creeping in from the fields. As I pulled up to 46 Morrow, I frowned. The house was wrong. It looked vacant. No lights, no movement. Just a hulking, sagging structure swallowed by darkness. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. Police department? Anyone inside? My voice felt small against the weight of the night. I approached the front door. It was ajar. A small detail, but something about it made my skin prickle. I clicked on my flashlight and nudged the door open. The inside was worse. Cold air, stale with the scent of damp wood and something faintly metallic. My beam swept across dust-covered furniture, an overturned chair. No signs of life. Hello? Police? If you're here, make yourself known. A creak came from upstairs. I stiffened, hand instinctively resting on my holster. Sir or ma'am, I need you to come down. Nothing. I took the stairs, each step groaning beneath my weight. The second floor was a hallway lined with doors. Then, a shadow shifted at the end of the hall. I barely caught it in my light, just a flicker of movement. Stop, police. Hands where I can see them. No response. I moved forward, pulse pounding. I pushed open the first door, empty. The second, empty. Then, the third door, half open. I raised my flashlight and stepped inside. The room was wrong. There was furniture here, a bed, a dresser, but it felt staged, like a set. A thick layer of dust covered everything except for one thing. A phone. An old rotary phone, black and sleek, sitting perfectly centered on a small wooden table. My radio crackled. Unit 14 status check. I exhaled, reaching for my radio. Dispatch, I'm inside. No sign of the caller. House appears vacant. Silence. Then, that's not true. The voice wasn't mine. It came from my radio. Every hair on my body stood up. Dispatch, repeat last transmission. Static. I swallowed hard and turned back to the hallway. The door slammed shut. I lunged for it, yanking at the handle. Locked. Hello? I shouted, slamming my shoulder against the wood. No movement. My heart pounded in my throat. Then, the phone rang. The old rotary phone. A shrill, deafening ring that shattered the silence. I hesitated. Then, with a shaking hand, I picked up the receiver. Hello? A whisper. Low, faint, almost familiar. Why did you come? The blood in my veins turned to ice. Who is this? A pause. Then, turn around. I spun, flashlight shaking. Nothing. But the closet door was open. And inside, something moved. I bolted, slamming my body against the door until it cracked open. Ran down the stairs, out into the night. My breath came in gasps as I fumbled for my keys, hands trembling. I tore out of there, gravel flying as I sped away. My radio crackled back to life. Unit 14, what's your status? I grabbed it, breathless. Dispatch. There was someone. I stopped myself. What could I even say? Unit 14? I'm clear. No contact. Returning to station. Silence. Then, copy that. I didn't file a report. I couldn't. There was no record of the call. No listing for 46 Morrow. It didn't exist. But the next night, my phone rang at exactly 2:17. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally worked up the courage to listen, there was only static. And beneath it, a whisper, low, faint, almost familiar. Why did you come? The call came in at 2:37. Possible 10:45 at 118 Sycamore Street. Neighbor reports hearing screams. 10:45. Possible dead body. I was halfway through a bad cup of gas station coffee when the radio crackled to life. Night shifts were usually quiet, filled with Dewey and the occasional domestic dispute, but something about this one made my stomach twist. The dispatcher's voice sounded tense. I flicked on my lights and pulled out of the empty parking lot where I'd been stationed. I've been a cop for almost 8 years now. My name's Alex Grayson, 32 years old, single and tired as hell most days. I joined the force because I thought I could make a difference. Thought I could help people. But I've learned something over the years. There are calls that don't make sense. Calls that don't fit into the neat little boxes they give you in training. Calls that make you question everything you think you know. This was one of those calls. 118 Sycamore wasn't the kind of house you'd expect trouble from. It was a single story, well-kept home, the kind old couples retire in. The porch light was on, and the curtains were drawn. Nothing about it screamed emergency, but I could still feel it, that weight in the air. I parked out front, radioed in my arrival, and stepped out. The night was quiet, too quiet. No barking dogs, no distant hum of late-night TV, just stillness. I knocked on the door. No answer. Police? Anyone home? Silence. I tried the knob. It turned easily. That was my first red flag. I stepped inside, one hand hovering over my holster. The house smelled strange. Not like death, exactly, more like something had been left out too long. Hello? I called again. A creak. I froze. It came from down the hall. I pulled out my flashlight, flicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a hallway lined with old photographs. Black and white images, the kind that seemed too old for a house like this. Another creak, this time closer. I moved forward, my heartbeat steady, but my grip tightening. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was slightly open, just enough to see inside. I pushed it open, and there she was. An elderly woman sat in a rocking chair, facing the window. Her back was to me, but I could see the slow, methodical motion of the chair. Rock. Pause. Ma'am? I took a step forward. Are you all right? She didn't respond. I stepped closer, shining my light toward her. Her skin looked wrong. Too pale, like wax. And her hands were gripping the armrest so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Ma'am? I tried again. She stopped rocking. The silence that followed was the worst I've ever experienced. I felt something shift in the air, something I couldn't explain. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but my training told me to stay, to check, to be sure. I reached out slowly, just enough to tap her shoulder, and that's when she turned. Her face, God, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like she was wearing her own skin wrong. Like something had rearranged her features slightly, just enough to be off. Her mouth was open, but too wide, her eyes black pits that reflected nothing. Then she spoke, but it wasn't a voice. It was a whisper, layered on top of itself, like 100 people speaking at once. You shouldn't be here. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The chair started rocking again. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt like it had been locked in place, and then I heard it behind me. A shuffle, a slow, deliberate footstep. I turned. The hallway was empty, but the photographs, they had changed. The faces, they were all looking at me now. I ran. I don't remember getting to my car, don't remember calling it in. But when backup arrived, the house was empty. The rocking chair was still, and the old woman was gone. The neighbors swore the house had been empty for years. And when I checked the police archives, my blood ran cold. There had been a call from 118 Sycamore before, 2 years ago. Same report, same screams, different officer. An officer who went missing that night. His name? Alex Grayson. My name. I put in my resignation the next morning, and I haven't looked back since.